My cheating wife tried to sneak out to a party with her lover, but I found out everything. I knew every detail before she even took the first step out the door. It felt like everything was falling apart, but ironically, she was more alive than ever. A new shine in the eyes, the light laughter that I hadn't heard in a long time. What changed? I knew exactly what was happening, and it was eating me up inside. The messages exchanged, the furtive smiles, the fragile apologies. She was so lost in the game that she didn't even realize that I already knew the rules. The night started like any other. She, more attentive, a touch of different perfume, makeup that she hadn't worn in months. Sitting on the sofa, she watched me with false tranquility. I casually asked about plans for the evening. A vague, typical answer, without looking directly into my eyes. And then, the perfect excuse, a night out with the girls. How did I not know? How could I not know? She was so confident in her lie, so sure that I would never suspect, that betrayal became a routine part of her behavior. But I knew everything. Every word spoken was a sharp knife being slowly stabbed into my back, cutting me from the inside, leaving me trapped between hate and love. She played with the certainty that I would never find out, while inside I was already torn apart. And now, as she prepared for another of her escapades, I watched every movement, every gesture planned with the precision of someone who has been lying for a long time. But what she didn't know was that tonight would be different. She thought she was in control, but the control was no longer in her hands. "I'm leaving, love," she said, with a forced smile, barely waiting for my response before opening the door. Silence took over the room when she left. I stood there, motionless, as the clock on the wall seemed to speed up with the pulse in my chest. Each second seemed to weigh more than the last. It wasn't a matter of anger, it was something deeper, something I couldn't control. I took out my cell phone and opened the last message I received. The words were still there, carved into the screen like a death sentence: "She's going to the party at 10, with him." I already knew who was on the other side. I knew where she was going, I knew what she was about to do. What I didn't know was where all that would take me. Hours before, the scene was already set. My informants, so to speak, had given me all the details. Friends, acquaintances, even people I didn't even consider close, but who knew what was happening. Everyone knew except me. Until I found out. And now? What do you do when everything you believed in was a hoax, a well-crafted illusion? The blood was boiling in my veins, but my head was cold. There was no room for impulsive reactions. The party would be in one of those exclusive places in the city. Rich people, dazzling lights, loud music, where no one pays attention to what really matters. It would be easy for her to disappear into the crowd, believing that there, in that chaotic environment, her secrets would be safe. She was wrong. Very wrong. Her every move had already been predicted. And at that moment, while she thought she was escaping everything, I was 2 steps ahead. I decided not to confront her right away. No. I wanted her to believe that everything was going according to her plan. I wanted to see her savor the lie until the last second. When the clock struck 9:45, she had already left the house 20 minutes ago, on her way to a meeting she thought was secret. I got up, grabbed my keys and headed towards the inevitable. The journey to the party was long, each street, each red light giving me time to think. Too long. What would she say to me when I finally confronted her? Maybe she would cry, maybe she would try to lie one last time, or maybe she would even admit everything, hoping I would forgive her. But there would be no forgiveness. Not this time. The love I felt for her was now tarnished, irreparably destroyed. And what was left? Just emptiness. Just the brutal truth. The house where the party was being held was one of those mansions hidden among the trees in a luxurious neighborhood in New York. Expensive cars parked in the driveway, loud music pouring through the windows, muffled laughter and conversations. I could smell the betrayal in the air, mixed with the expensive perfume she always wore when she went out without me. I parked the car a few meters away and walked slowly to the entrance. Lights shone through the windows, and music vibrated on the floor beneath my feet. Everything seemed perfect to the world inside. But for me, it was like the floor was about to collapse. She was there. I knew. Next to him. The lover. The man she chose to betray our story, the man who had infiltrated what was once our life. The anger was growing, but the need to maintain control was stronger. I approached the entrance, and at that moment, I saw the first clue that something was wrong. A strange movement. It wasn't just the noisy party that attracted attention. There were police cars. Flashing siren lights, still distant but getting closer. The party was going to be interrupted. Fate has a curious way of correcting the course of things, I thought. All I wanted was to see the truth reveal itself, and now, unexpectedly, it was about to be exposed, but not in the way I imagined. The police raid happened before I could take the next step. They arrived, invaded, and chaos took over the place. Guests ran, screams, the music stopped abruptly, and soon confusion took over the mansion. She, in the middle of everything, lost, confused, trying to understand what was happening. But there was more. I knew she would have to call me. She would need me to get out of that situation. Because at the end of the day, when everything falls apart, who would she turn to? The lover? No, he was already far away, disappearing into the darkness. She only had one person to turn to. And now, all that was left was to wait. My phone started vibrating in my pocket. A message appeared on the screen. My heart raced, but I already knew what was coming next. She was trapped. John always believed his life with Lisa was solid. There were moments of silence, of occasional arguments, but what marriage didn't have that? They had been together for over a decade. They met during college, at one of the year-end parties that Lisa organized with such enthusiasm. She, a woman with contagious energy, was the center of attention wherever she went, with a presence capable of lighting up any environment. John, on the other hand, has always been more reserved. He preferred to observe situations before diving into them, and that was exactly what attracted him to Lisa, her spontaneity, her easy laugh, the way she made the world seem lighter. When they got married, things seemed in place. John had a stable career in finance, and Lisa worked at a marketing agency, where her creativity had always been appreciated. They had a comfortable but not luxurious life. The house they bought on the outskirts of town was spacious enough to host the parties Lisa loved to throw, and simple enough not to attract too much attention. In the early years, marriage was like any other, nights together on the couch, spontaneous weekend trips and the expectation of a family that would one day come. But time has a strange way of eating away at things without you even realizing it. The relationship began to change gradually. John couldn't say exactly when things became different, but somehow Lisa's laughter seemed less frequent, conversations at the dinner table became brief, and the small displays of affection that were once part of the daily routine began to disappear. The work began to consume more of their time, but John never suspected there was anything more to it than that. He thought it was just the natural wear and tear that comes with the years. A wear and tear that can be repaired with effort and dedication. Lisa, on the other hand, hid her dissatisfaction behind smiles that didn't reach her eyes. She has always been an ambitious woman. Although John didn't realize it, the life they built together seemed too small for her. It wasn't that she didn't love her husband, but something inside her yearned for more emotion, more intensity, more than Friday nights spent on the couch watching shows that no longer interested her. And while John fell deeper into work, Lisa looked for new ways to fill the emptiness she felt. Events, new hobbies, new people. The desire for something different grew silently, without her being able to control it. It was barely noticeable to John, but the changes were there. He remembered the nights when Lisa would return from some social gathering, always radiant, always telling stories full of details about the people she met, the opportunities that arose. She seemed to live at a different pace, as if the world around her was always vibrating with possibilities, while he, caught up in the routine of work and responsibilities, watched from afar. The sparkle in Lisa's eyes was no longer for him, and yet he convinced himself that everything was fine. It was just a phase, he told himself. All relationships go through moments like this. Still, there was something about Lisa that bothered him, although he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was the new perfume she started wearing, something stronger, bolder. Or maybe it was the clothes, a little more elaborate than usual, especially when she went out without him. And the departures, those started to increase. Dinners with friends from work, last-minute meetings that came out of nowhere, nights where she simply said she needed time for herself. John questioned, but always accepted the explanations he received. I didn't want to seem controlling. He trusted Lisa. Always trusted. On the nights she was away, John tried to distract himself with his own tasks. He would immerse himself in work reports, or watch an old movie that he knew Lisa didn't like. But, as the days passed, a certain discomfort began to emerge. He found himself looking at the clock more often, waiting for the message that often took a while to arrive. When she finally returned, there was always an excuse for why she was late, and the smile on Lisa's face made any suspicions disappear. Lisa, in turn, had her own internal battles. Part of her knew she was moving away from John, but the other part, the part that yearned for something more, always found justifications for her actions. She convinced herself that she deserved more. More adventure, more passion, more life. And, little by little, this desire took over her. John, with his calm and predictable way, seemed increasingly distant from everything she wanted for herself. And so, she created a parallel world, a world where John had no place. At work meetings, Lisa began to meet more than just professional colleagues. She met new people, made new friends, and, through it all, she started to feel alive again. There were different conversations, different environments, which made her feel valued and desired. John, with his fixed and predictable routines, no longer filled her like he used to. She still loved her husband, at least that's what she told herself, but love no longer seemed to be enough. Something deeper, more dangerous, was being born inside her. And while Lisa explored these new sensations, John remained oblivious to everything. He saw the change in his wife's behavior, but refused to see beyond what she showed him. I preferred to believe that everything was in order, that there was no reason to worry. Perhaps because the truth, if discovered, would be too unbearable. So, he immersed himself even more in work, in the small distractions he found to fill the void that was beginning to widen between them. However, there were times when John allowed himself to question. When Lisa went out to another one of those social gatherings that seemed endless, he wondered if it really was normal. It was as if a shadow hung over the relationship, something he couldn't fully identify, but which was always there, in the back of his mind. The doubt grew, but he suppressed it. Lisa always knew how to remove any suspicion. Her kisses, her brief touches and sweet words were enough to calm him, to make him believe that everything was okay. But it wasn't. John knew, even if he didn't want to admit it. And that silent certainty accompanied him on every lonely night, every time she went out without him. He still didn't know what was coming, but he already felt the weight of something inevitable. Whatever it was getting closer, and he had no way to stop it. Lisa, in turn, sank deeper and deeper into the new world she had created for herself. And the further he went, the harder it was to come back. The sound of the wall clock marked time in rhythmic, almost hypnotic beats. John was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the cell phone screen that remained motionless on the counter. Lisa had gone out again that night. An exit that, initially, he accepted with the same calmness as always, until the feeling that something was wrong set in once and for all. It wasn't just the new perfume, or the more sophisticated clothes. It wasn't the excuse that I was going to meet friends. It was deeper. Something had changed between them, and now it seemed impossible to ignore what was growing in the shadows of their routine. He began to remember how everything had been in the first years of marriage. The nights they stayed up late, laughing about everything, as if time didn't exist for them. Now, however, there was silence. The space between them grew wider every day, even when they were in the same room. The previous sparkle in her eyes seemed to have been replaced by something distant, as if she were physically there but her mind wandered elsewhere. John stood up uneasily, walking to the living room window. The street lights glowed indifferently, illuminating the deserted sidewalk. The silence of the night enveloped everything except his mind, which was buzzing with questions. He felt the weight of a crushing doubt that only intensified as the hours passed. It was late, and Lisa hadn't given any news. He hadn't responded to her last messages, nor called like he usually did to say everything was fine. He knew, deep down, that this wasn't just a date with friends. It was no longer something innocent, if it ever had been. There was something behind the frequent departures, the smiles that didn't belong to her, the looks she avoided when they were together. A part of John resisted admitting it. He preferred to cling to the hope that it was all just a phase, a change in mood or interests. But another part of him, the more rational and painful one, knew he was facing something bigger. The sleepless nights, the excuses, the designer clothes she never mentioned buying. He began to notice details that he had previously ignored. The way she would leave her cell phone face down on the table when they had dinner, or how she would rush out to answer calls in the hallway, always saying it was work stuff. The evidence was there, but John, deep down, didn't want to see it. That night, however, something changed. He wasn't willing to wait any longer for answers that would never come. He took out his cell phone and typed a simple message to Lisa, "Are you okay?" A direct question, but loaded with meaning. He knew she would respond with the same excuse as always, but this time, it wouldn't be enough. There was something more, something he was about to discover, even if he wasn't prepared for it. The clock said midnight when the message arrived. "I'm with the girls, I'll be back soon," was the response that appeared on the screen. The coldness in the words made her heart beat faster, but not from anxiety, it was anger. He felt like he was being deceived, manipulated. And that hurt more than he could imagine. John sat down again, his fingers tapping lightly on the table as his mind worked on possibilities he didn't want to admit. He looked at his watch once again. If she was with friends, why was it taking so long? Why was the cell phone, previously always in sight, now so protected, as if it were a threat to your privacy? He wasn't the kind of man who allowed himself to be consumed by jealousy, but the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place in a terrible way. The doubts grew, and he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep until he had answers. At that moment, something inside him broke. John grabbed his car keys and left the house, determined to find out what was going on. He knew the name of the restaurant where Lisa said she was, and it wouldn't take long to get there. His body was tense, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he drove through the silent streets. The lights from the streetlights passed by like figures as he advanced into the unknown. When he finally parked near the spot, his heart was racing. He didn't know exactly what he expected to find, but he could no longer deceive himself. There was an invisible force guiding him, as if every step he took was inevitable. He entered the restaurant discreetly, his eyes attentive to every face, every detail. I knew that if Lisa was there, it wouldn't be difficult to find her. And, in fact, it wasn't. Sitting at a table in the corner, away from the entrance, Lisa was not with any friends. The sight paralyzed John for a moment. She was there, with another man. The two laughed, exchanging complicit glances, as if the world around them was irrelevant. Lisa's smile, the same one he hadn't seen in so long, was now offered to another. And suddenly, everything made sense. The mysterious exits, the prolonged silences, the distance. The betrayal was there, exposed before his eyes, and nothing more needed to be said. John stood there, not moving, not knowing how to react. The ground seemed to disappear beneath his feet, and a mixture of anger and disbelief washed over him. The man who was with Lisa touched her hand gently, a gesture that would seem trivial to anyone, but to John it was the final blow. It was an intimate touch, a touch that belonged to him but had now been stolen. Lisa was so immersed in that moment that she didn't notice John. She laughed, her eyes sparkled like he hadn't seen in a long time. And that, more than anything else, destroyed what was left of his confidence. The truth was there, clear and painful, he had been betrayed. Without making a sound, John backed away. The words were stuck in his throat, but he couldn't get them out. There was nothing to say. The betrayal was complete, and the weight of it crushed him. As he left the restaurant, the cold night air gave him a reality check. He knew that nothing would be the same as before. John couldn't sleep that night. The weight of betrayal crushed him, and anger mixed with deep pain. What he had witnessed in the restaurant echoed in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't avoid. Lisa's laughter with another man, the looks, the delicate touch between them. Everything seemed like a distortion of the reality he knew. The woman with whom he shared his life, his dreams and his plans was involved in something that left him feeling helpless. He didn't know how to deal with it. He lay awake, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. He knew he would have to face her at some point, and the words were forming in his mind, an avalanche ready to collapse. As the clock struck 4 a.m, the front door opened. John heard the sound of Lisa's heels echoing through the house. His heart raced. It wasn't the first time she was late, but that night, he knew everything. He got up, his body tense, and went to the living room, where he found her taking off her coat with a carefree expression on her face. She didn't expect to see him there, sitting on the sofa, staring at her. Lisa hesitated for a moment, surprised to see him awake. "What are you doing there at this hour?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but there was a tension in her voice, a restrained nervousness that she couldn't completely hide. John remained silent for a few seconds, his eyes fixed on her, as if trying to decipher every gesture, every word. "Where were you, Lisa?" he asked, his voice low but carrying an intensity that made her stomach turn. "I already told you." "I was with the girls," she replied hastily, looking away as she took off her shoes. "It was just a night of talking, nothing much." "With the girls?" he repeated, slowly getting up, the contained fury reflected in the way the words escaped between his teeth. "Because I went to the place you said you would be, and you weren't there, Lisa." She stopped, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you talking about, John? Did you go after me?" "Yes, I was," he replied, stepping forward. "And you know what I saw? I saw you sitting with another man. Laughing, touching him. I saw everything, Lisa." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Lisa looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She tried to speak, tried to find an excuse, but the words wouldn't come. Her body felt frozen, and at that moment, she knew there was no escape. John knew. "Who is he?" asked John, his voice now colder, filled with controlled anger. "How many times did you meet him? How many lies did you tell me?" Lisa tried to compose herself, but the impact of the discovery was devastating. She knew there was no escape now. He slowly sat down in the armchair, running his hands over his face in a gesture of exhaustion. "John," he began, his voice trembling, "it's not what you think." "Isn't it?" he exploded, control finally slipping away. "I saw you with him. You lied to me for months, Lisa. How long has this been going on?" She looked at him, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "It wasn't something I planned, John. I just felt so lost." "Lost?" he repeated in disbelief. "Lost? And you thought the solution was to cheat on your husband? Betray the life we built together?" Lisa began to cry, the tears falling silently as John watched her with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. I don't know what happened. Don't you know what happened? John laughed, a bitter, pain-filled laugh. You destroyed what we had, Lisa. Why? What did I do to deserve this? She couldn't answer. There were no words that could justify what she had done. All she could do was face the truth that lay between them, a truth she never wanted to admit. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. But you hurt, John shot back, voice getting lower, colder. Now, what do you expect me to do? For me to just forget all this? Lisa shook her head desperately. No. I don't know. I was so confused. Things between us have changed, John. You've changed. Have I changed? He repeated in disbelief. I was here, Lisa. I've always been here. I tried. I tried to make it work. But you left long before you told me. It's not that simple, she tried to justify. I felt alone. All we did was work, and I needed something more. John took a step back, feeling as if a chasm was opening between them. Anything else? He repeated, with evident bitterness. Do you think the problem is that I was too busy? That I wasn't paying attention? And your solution was to cheat on me? The words echoed through the room, heavy, cutting. Lisa didn't know what to answer. Everything seemed to fall apart around her, and she realized there was no way to fix what had been done. I'm so sorry, he repeated, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, John. I didn't want it to be like this. But for John, the excuses no longer mattered. What was done was done. And there was no turning back. He watched her for a few seconds, trying to understand how the woman he loved had gotten to this point. Who is he? He asked again, now with less anger, but still full of pain. Lisa hesitated, trying to find a way to minimize the impact, but she knew that any response would only make things worse. He's someone from my work, she admitted, lowering her eyes. Someone I started seeing, a few months ago. John closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the confession. The betrayal was even deeper than he imagined. Months ago, he repeated, each word filled with disbelief. You've been lying to me for months. Lisa nodded, unable to speak. The weight of what she had done was finally hitting her, and she felt the guilt gnawing at her insides. John was standing still, his eyes blank, as if he was trying to make some sense of it all. But there wasn't. The reality was brutal and inescapable, their marriage was torn apart. Silence took over the room again, and Lisa knew that, as much as she wanted to, there was nothing she could say or do to erase what happened. John, please. She tried, her voice choked with tears. I don't know what happened to me. But I love you. I love you, and I never wanted it to come to this. He laughed, a joyless laugh, filled with sadness. Love? He shook his head. Do you think what you did is love? She tried to respond, but her voice disappeared. The words were lost in the void. What remained between them was only silence, and the certainty that something had broken forever. Now the truth was exposed. The secret, however, still hung in the air, waiting to be revealed. John remained standing in the middle of the room, his eyes fixed on Lisa, but it was as if he was seeing through her. Her words, I love you, reverberated in his head, but they sounded empty, hollow. How can someone talk about love after destroying everything that was important? He wanted to scream, he wanted to cry, but he was stuck in a state of shock, a mixture of pain and anger that he couldn't fully express. Lisa, sitting in the armchair, looked small now. Tears ran freely down her face, but it wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. How could apologies and tears fix what was hopelessly broken? Why? John asked again, his voice hoarse, as if every word was an effort. Why did you do that? Lisa sobbed, trying to control her emotions. I don't know, John. I got lost. Everything felt so empty between us. And he was there, listening to me, making me feel alive again. Alive again. The anger finally began to boil over, his voice rising. Are you telling me that while I was here, trying to keep everything going, trying to provide for us, you were having fun with another man because you wanted to feel alive? Lisa flinched at the intensity of John's voice, but didn't try to defend herself. She knew there was no way. Everything she said now would sound like a flimsy excuse. What about me? John continued, his voice full of pain. Was I dead to you? Was that it? Was I just a burden? Someone you had to live with while you found your life elsewhere? Lisa shook her head, tears growing. No, John, that's not it. I still love you. Stop saying that, he interrupted, his voice echoing off the walls of the room. If you loved me, this wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have lied to me, you wouldn't have betrayed me, you wouldn't have, he stopped, trying to control his breathing, you wouldn't have destroyed everything. The silence between them was suffocating. Lisa looked at the floor, unable to look at John. The gravity of the situation was finally sinking in completely. She knew she had made terrible choices, choices she might never be able to redeem herself from. How many times? John asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Lisa looked up, confused. How many times have you met him, Lisa? How many nights did you lie to me and be with him? She didn't want to answer, but she knew there was no way to escape the truth anymore. It was a few times, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Not as many as you think. As many as I think. John laughed bitterly. I don't even know what to think anymore, Lisa. The woman I married, who I shared everything with, is telling me it was just a few times, as if that would make me feel better. As if cheating was something you could measure. Lisa buried her face in her hands, her crying now desperate. I'm so sorry, John. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, but please forgive me. I didn't know what I was doing. I was confused. John took a deep breath, trying to control the anger that was bubbling inside him. Confused? You knew exactly what you were doing, Lisa. Don't tell me it was a mistake, that you were lost. That was a choice. A conscious, repeated choice, a continuous betrayal. She didn't respond. I knew he was right. He knew that everything he said would sound empty in the face of the immutable truth of his actions. Silence fell once again, and for a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. John turned away, slowly walking to the window, trying to find some peace in the repetitive movement of the lights outside. He wanted to think, but his thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions, and nothing made sense. The anger, the disgust, the pain, everything mixed together in a knot in his chest. Then, Lisa got up from her seat. She was still crying, but her expression had changed. She knew she had lost John. He knew that no matter how much he begged, nothing would bring back what they had been. But even so, there was something she needed to say. John, she began, her voice shaking. I never wanted it to end like this. I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. And I know it might be too late, but I wanted you to know that. She stopped, hesitantly, trying to find the right words. He turned to her, his gaze hard, waiting for her to finish. I wasn't alone at that party tonight, she finally said, her voice thick with shame. I was with him, yes, but something happened. Something I never expected. John looked at her, intrigued, but not wanting to be shaken. What do you mean by that? Lisa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. The police showed up, John. There was a raid at the party, and I was arrested. The words hung in the air, as if time had stopped. John stood still, surprise written all over his face. You were what? I was arrested, she repeated, the tears now flowing again. Me and him, we were together when the police arrived. It was a clandestine party, and they took us. But I only had one person to call. And that's why I sent you that message, trying to hide it. Because I knew that, in the end, I would need you to get me out of this. John felt like he had been punched in the stomach. The betrayal was already enough to destroy him, but now, the public humiliation, the scandal that followed, made everything even more bitter. The image of Lisa being taken away by the police with her lover by her side was the end of any shred of hope he might have had. Did you want me to be your savior? The disbelief was clear in his voice. You were with another man, you were arrested, and you still thought that I, the husband you cheated on, would rescue you? Lisa began to cry harder, unable to hold her gaze. I know it was horrible. I know. But in the end, John, I realized that you're the only one I can trust. I know I did everything wrong, but I need you now. John remained silent for a few moments, his eyes fixed on her, analyzing every word, every gesture. And in that moment, he knew. I knew that no matter how sorry Lisa was, no matter how much she begged, there was no going back. He took a step forward, the expression on his face now as cold as ice. Lisa, you destroyed everything. There's nothing left to save. And you know what's worse? I have always been here for you. I was always by your side, but you chose to lie, betray, and humiliate me. And now you want my help. I'll give you some advice. Turn around. You chose this path. Now deal with the consequences. Without waiting for a response, John turned and left the room, leaving Lisa behind, lost in her own tears and regret. John left the room, leaving Lisa behind, but the weight of that last conversation still crushed him. The sound of your own footsteps echoed through the silent house, each tap of your feet on the floor seemed synchronized with the strong beat of your heart. He didn't know where he was going inside his own house. I just needed space, air, distance from her. His head was buzzing with thoughts, and his emotions felt like a storm inside him, revolving around a single word, betrayal. He walked up the stairs to the room he had shared with Lisa for so many years. Every detail there, from the curtains to the quilt on the bed, brought back memories of a life he thought had been real, but now seemed like just a well-told lie. He threw himself on the bed, staring at the ceiling, his hands covering his face. The pain he felt wasn't just from the physical betrayal, it was as if his entire world had been uprooted, the roots of his marriage pulled from the ground, leaving him exposed, empty. Meanwhile, in the living room, Lisa was still sitting, the tears drying on her face, her eyes red from crying. She knew John wouldn't be back anytime soon, maybe he wouldn't be back at all. The words he had said echoed in his head like a constantly beating hammer, deal with the consequences. She knew that the choices she had made had brought her to this point. But knowing that didn't make the pain any more bearable. It didn't make the regret go away. On the contrary, it increased. Lisa felt like she was trapped in a net she had woven herself, and now she didn't know how to escape. Guilt gnawed at every part of her being, and the anger John felt only worsened the weight of regret that was drowning her. All she wanted was to go back in time, change the choices she made, but she knew the damage was done. She knew that this betrayal wasn't just a passing mistake. It was a wound that would never close. Lisa got up, her steps unsteady, and walked to the kitchen. I needed to think, I needed something to calm the despair I felt, but nothing seemed to help. He opened the refrigerator mechanically, taking out a bottle of water and taking a sip, but the taste was bitter. Nothing seemed to ease the pain that was growing inside her. She knew she had to do something. But what? Returning to John now seemed impossible. He was hurt beyond repair, and Lisa knew his words would mean nothing given the enormity of what he had done. She wanted to ask for forgiveness, she wanted him to understand that her betrayal wasn't about him, but about the insecurities and emptiness she herself felt. But how to explain this? How to justify the unjustifiable? Upstairs, John was also struggling with his own demons. He had asked Lisa to deal with the consequences, but what about him? He was also in the middle of an emotional storm. How do you move forward after discovering something like this? Was it possible to forgive? And, if he forgave, would he be able to continue living with someone who had betrayed him so deeply? Or was he destined to live with this open wound for the rest of his life, carrying the weight of shattered trust? John got up from the bed, his stomach churning with a mix of anger and frustration. The dilemma he faced seemed insurmountable. In an ideal world, things would be simple: he would leave her and move on with his life, without looking back. But the reality was more complicated than that. There were years of history, years of love, of partnership. He knew Lisa like no one else. He knew her fears, her flaws, and, on some level, he still loved her. Love didn't disappear overnight, even with betrayal. But would love be enough to overcome what she had done? Walking to the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror, the reflection staring back at him as if he were a stranger to himself. The person looking back was different. I was exhausted, dejected. The eyes that had always reflected confidence and serenity were now filled with uncertainty and pain. He knew he needed to make a decision. But which one? He couldn't continue like this, lost between love and betrayal. While John was struggling with his thoughts, Lisa, below, was also coming to her own conclusions. There was no longer any way to escape reality. Their marriage was hanging by a thread, and she knew that if she wanted to have any chance of redemption, she would have to be completely honest with him. I couldn't hide anything anymore. Everything had to be put on the table, no matter how painful it was. She knew that the betrayal had already been revealed, but the weight of the secret, the fact that she had been detained and needed his help to get out of that situation, had not yet been fully explored. She needed to talk to him, face what she had done head-on, even if it meant the definitive end of everything. Lisa climbed the stairs, her feet heavy, her heart racing, and stopped in front of the bedroom door. For a moment, he thought about knocking, but decided against it. She was no longer a stranger in that room, but now she seemed like an intruder. She opened the door slowly, her eyes already filling with tears when she saw John sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her. "John," she began, her voice shaking. He didn't turn around, but she knew he was listening. I need to tell you something else." He remained silent, and Lisa felt the weight of the moment fall upon her. "I knew there was no going back. I didn't tell you everything about what happened tonight." John turned around, finally. His eyes were filled with a mixture of pain and exhaustion. "Is there more?" he asked in disbelief. "What else could you have done, Lisa?" She took a deep breath, the tears already starting to fall again. "I was arrested, John. The police raided the party, and I was with him. We were both detained." John stared at her, shock evident on his face. The words hung in the air for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. As if the betrayal wasn't enough, now there was the prison scandal. Lisa wiped her tears with her hands, her voice breaking. "I know this is the end. I know there's no going back, but I wanted you to know. I only had one person to call. And I called you, John. Because in the end, you're still the only person I trust. Even after everything." John stood up, the pain and anger rising within him once again. "Were you arrested?" he repeated, his voice incredulous. "You were arrested and you still have the audacity to tell me that you trust me? After everything?" She nodded, unable to speak. John began pacing back and forth, hands in his hair, trying to process what he had just heard. "You ruined everything, Lisa. All." She cried, silently, no longer having the strength to defend herself. He knew he had reached the end of the road, and now all he had to do was deal with the consequences of his choices. John stopped walking and looked at her one last time. "I don't know what you expected, Lisa, but I can't do this anymore. I can't save you anymore." And with that, he left the room, leaving her alone with guilt and silence. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, reverberating like a final blow. John left, leaving Lisa alone in the room, in the void she had created. Every step he took out of that house was a step away from everything they had built together. Of love, of trust, of shared life. And now, everything seemed to disintegrate. Lisa stood there, motionless, tears still streaming down her face. She felt completely destroyed. The confession, the arrest, the betrayal, everything culminated at that moment. The silence in the room felt heavy, suffocating, but she knew there was no escape. The consequences of her choices were before her, and the naked truth was that she had lost John. There was nothing more that could be done. She stood up slowly, her eyes wandering around the room that now seemed so strange, so empty. Every object there, the lamp next to the bed, the old photos that decorated the wall, the clothes folded neatly in the drawers, all told the story of a life that, however familiar it once was, now seemed distant, unrecognizable. He descended the stairs in silence, each step seemed to echo his defeat. The house looked different now, without John's presence. She tried to organize her thoughts, but all that came to mind was his look of pain and disappointment. She knew she had lost him forever. The weight of his choices was overwhelming. She sat in the kitchen, where she had so often shared meals and laughs with John. The emptiness around him reflected the emptiness within him. John, on the other hand, walked through the dark streets, feeling the cold wind cut into his skin, but the feeling was no worse than what he felt inside. My stomach was churning, my mind was in a constant state of confusion. Lisa's betrayal was like an open wound, throbbing every second. He wanted to erase the images from his mind, her laughter with another man, the confession that she had been involved for months, the revelation that she had been arrested, but it haunted him like a shadow. He didn't know what to do. He walked aimlessly, lost within himself, until he found himself in front of a bar. A small place, with dim lights and muffled music coming from inside. Without thinking, he entered. He sat at the counter, ordered a drink and let the alcohol numb, even if for a few moments, the pain that consumed his heart. While John sank into his drink, Lisa stayed at home, staring at the cell phone in her hands. She knew she should call someone, but there was no one to turn to. The friends I used to hang out with on girls' nights weren't really close. She felt the weight of loneliness overwhelmingly. The man she had cheated on John with, the person who, in a way, was her escape, her outlet, wasn't there to help her either. He had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared in her life. The irony was suffocating. In the end, Lisa was alone. And that was exactly what she deserved. She looked around the house, now empty and cold, and realized what she had lost. More than her husband, she had lost the trust, the genuine love, the stability that, for so many years, they had built together. He had lost the only person who really mattered. Lisa got up, opened the front door and stared at the deserted street. She knew John wouldn't come back, but she hoped, somehow, that he would change his mind. May he give her one last chance. But deep down, I knew that this chance would never come. She had crossed a line that could not be undone. Their marriage was destroyed, and all that was left were the pieces of a life she herself had broken. John, on the other hand, continued to drink at the bar. The alcohol didn't make the pain go away, but at least it dulled his thoughts for a moment. He knew he couldn't continue living like that. He knew there was no going back to his marriage, but he also knew that moving forward would be a daily battle. Every part of his life was tied to Lisa, and now he had to learn to live without her. The night progressed slowly, and their loneliness intensified. Lisa, at home, lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling. John, at the bar, looking lost in his glass. The silence between them was deafening, and the future seemed uncertain. Over time, Lisa realized that the only way was to move forward, even if alone. He knew he would need to find a way to rebuild his life, but the marks of what he had done would never completely disappear. John, in turn, knew he would need time to heal the wounds, to let the pain gradually subside. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now he was free from the lies and betrayals that had imprisoned him for so long. That night, they were confronted with the choices they made and the consequences of their actions. And in the end, only the pain of truth remained. Lisa would pay the price for her choices, and John, despite being hurt, would begin the process of rebuilding his life, step by step, away from everything he once knew as safe and familiar. And so the story ends. What did you think? Did you connect with the characters and the dilemmas they faced? Comment your opinion below, we want to know what you think about this intense story. If you are not yet subscribed, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any more impactful stories like this. And remember, our channel does not support any type of cheating. The values of respect and loyalty are fundamental in any relationship. Until next time.